Hey there, friends and enemies. JoPaWrites here again, and today I wanted to rank all of the Remnant 2 archetypes in the game as of today, based on not only how fun they are, how they take on various types of content, and how good they are across different difficulty levels in the game as well. Keeping in mind this is all very subjective. If I rank yours too low, let me know in the comments, but don't get too upset about it because, again, this is my own personal opinion, and based on not only my own gameplay, how much I've used them, but also what I've seen online as far as builds and all that kind of good stuff and the general consensus that I've seen. So jumping right into it, we're going to hit up the Challenger. This is going to be right into the B tier for me. Now, I will admit this is based on a perceived notion that I had that this was going to be the melee class in the game, which it can be, but the unfortunate reality is Remnant 2 is not really built for melee archetypes in general. Like, it doesn't really work well when most of the bosses are not able to be meleeed consistently. So that's really unfortunate. And it really put a damper on this archetype for me. I know it's good. I know it has a self-res function and it's got a lot of good other options. The shotgun you start with is very nice, but for me personally, the lack of ability to be a melee tank character is the most frustrating part. So that's why I rank it a little lower. Fair or not, I don't care. That's just my own personal feeling on it. Then we get into the medic. This one is going to be another B tier for me. I wish it was better, right? And the reason I wish it was better is because it doesn't seem to scale as high across different types of content. And for me, it's not as fun unless I'm playing in a group. The medic is fine if you're with a team of two other players, but as a solo player, I didn't really enjoy it as much at times. And at the highest level, once you rank up your characters to your archetypes to max level 10, I feel like the Alchemist is a better healer and more versatile than the Medic. So that's why I do think that it drops down just a little bit there, because while I would love for the Medic to be a main of a lot of people as a support class, I do think the Alchemist is better, and there's just better options overall. Then we get to the Hunter, which I think is going to slide into the A tier here. This one is solid. There's a lot of build potential with this one. For me, it's not going to ever be S tier just because I don't enjoy the playstyle with it, but I've seen some insane builds with the Gunslinger. I do think there's a lot of good options with this thing, especially if you are a range player who likes sniping or just distance play in general. So that's why it's going to go in A tier. I do think there's a high skill ceiling for it as a class compared to some of the other starting classes as well, besides the Gunslinger, but that's why I'm going to rank it here. Then we go into the Handler. This one I'm going to tell you flat out from the jump, this is just my personal favorite archetype in the game. Obviously, we got the Dog Companion. It carried me through a lot of the content on Survivor and veteran difficulties, especially as a player who's relatively new to the Remnant franchise. This one was a lifesaver. The self-res was insane. Having an enemy taunt, being able to revive my allies when I don't have to go up to them and actually revive them. I can get them at a distance when I'm playing with my friends, especially in boss fights, was very, very nice. Having the different buffs that you can get, whether it's defensive, whether it's healing, there's just a lot of versatility with it, and I absolutely love it. I have used it pretty relentlessly, and it felt weird when I switched off it, so it made the game much harder when I switched to something else, and that's how I know it's S tier for me. Again, whether it is the best archetype in the game, it doesn't matter. It is all personal opinion on these rankings, so just keep that in mind. Gunslinger. I don't personally love the Gunslinger, but the damage output you can do with it is so insane it can't be ignored. There are just too many builds, too many options I've seen with the Gunslinger where you can just output insane damage across all the difficulty levels from beginner to the hardest difficulty. So Gunslinger remains in the S tier slot, and I think is going to be one of the best and most used archetypes that we're going to see in the game for quite some time. It's very, very good, and it's one that I really, really enjoy, even though it's not my favorite overall. I do think it's just very, very good. And there's a lot of reasons why you would pick that as your primary for sure. Then we get to the Alchemist, and I'm going to put this in A. Like I already mentioned, I think at the highest end, it's a better healer than the Medic. That's why it's going to be ranked above it. It's also more versatile. There's a lot of different options. Having the two concoctions going at the same time is very, very nice. There's just a lot of reasons for this to be very good that I think are overlooked when you first get this class. You look at the archetype and you're like, this seems okay. This seems okay. Like a lot of its build, it's kind of a jack of all trades. But when you really get it down to a science with the Alchemist, you can make it very, very good. And I think that's something that a lot of people are going to see as they go through. If you're having problems staying alive, this is one that could help you out tremendously. So then we get the Invader. I think this one is A as well. For me personally, I just like the decoy. I like having some of the different options that you have with the Invader. I think it can be very, very good. And it pairs with so many different archetypes. This is one that I probably won't rock as my primary archetype a lot, but I would pair it with a lot of different options. You can pair it with the Gunslinger, you can pair it with the Handler, you can pair it with basically anything in the game, and it can be very, very fun, very good. And so that's why I'm going to stick it in the A tier. I think there's going to be a lot of builds out there with this one that really shine a lot more than people might expect at first glance. Then we have the Summoner. This one's interesting to me because I do love the Summoner personally. I think it's pretty solid, and I think it's going to stay in the B tier though, because as somebody who has used summon type options throughout the game with Handler and Engineer, I just feel like it's the weakest of the three, so that's why I'm going to drop it down to the bottom. Weakest for me personally. I know the top end potential is very good with this. There's a lot of things you can do with it, with like healing when you shoot your summons and all that kind of stuff. But I just wanted it to be a little bit better personally, as far as like leaning into a summon build, and that just hasn't been the case as much as I really wanted to. That being said, there are some really good builds with this one, and I think, again, just like with the Challenger, some of my frustration is just the ideas in my head, the build planning that I had not working out as I wanted it to. So as I tinker with it more, this is probably going to change over the course of time as I get all of the various rings and relics and amulets and all that stuff. I'm sure there are places that can shine. And that's what matters with these rankings as well. A lot of it is like, what weapons have you gotten so far? What amulets and rings and stuff that have really buffed up that specific playstyle. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Then we got the Explorer. This one is going to be C tier. Probably, in my opinion, the worst archetype of the game. Really good for exploring, really good for uncovering secrets, but you can't really use it well across different types of content. And that's the frustrating part is I wish it was like, okay, if I'm heading into more difficult content, can I run the Explorer consistently? Or will I want to change off to one of the other archetypes? Inevitably, you're almost always going to want to change off unless you're so good that it doesn't really matter what you're running. And that way, if that's the case, then these rankings are irrelevant anyway. But overall, I think the Explorer is the worst of the archetypes in the game so far. Then we've got the Engineer. I think this is another A tier. This is another one that I've used from the moment I got it until I beat the game, and even past that after I've cleared more content. It's just so easy to throw down a turret, whether it is your main Archon turret, whether it's a flamethrower, whether it is the final turret, doesn't matter. All of them have their uses. If you're being rushed by waves and waves of enemies, you can throw down your final turret, and it's just going to clear them so easily. It does so much damage, and your flamethrower does insane chunk damage at a distance, and then your Vulcan one obviously is going to be your primary, which you can use across bosses that are moving a lot, that stay far away. You won't be able to hit them with your other two turrets. So yeah, the versatility is there, the damage is insane, everything is very, very good about that. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun. I love having a turret down as extra damage pretty much constantly. Again, the skill ceiling is there compared to some of the other archetypes, but it is insanely effective overall, especially if you want to just hard focus on damage and let your turret clear the enemies around you, clear all the ads pretty easily. So it's very nice, and I like it quite a bit. Finally, we have the Archon archetype, which isn't listed here, but that is going to be an S tier. That's one of those archetypes that takes build potential to an extremely different level. You can throw it with any single one of your other archetypes and it will shine. Having the additional mod benefits is insane, and that's the only archetype that I don't currently have, and I can't wait to get it because it's absolutely insane. It looks like it's going to be a blast to use. But everything I've seen on it, when I've looked at the stats, I've looked at people using it, all that stuff, it looks unbelievable. So I just cannot wait. This is going to be the end of my tier list. We got 3 S's, a couple of 4 A's, 3 B's, and 1 C. Overall, I think the archetypes are generally in a good spot. I think a lot of what you're going to see is going to be people rating these based on play style as well as what type of content they like to take on the most, whether they're playing solo or co-op matters. So all of that is something to keep in mind. Anyway, my name is Jopa. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Helps me out tremendously. Shows you want to see more Remnant 2 content from me going forward. I hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.